Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. So Daniel Dubois has stepped up and has taken the fight which Efe Ajagba, Moses Itauma, and Richard Torres turned down. And that is an IBF final eliminator against Frank Sanchez. Now, some people are saying this is a crazy move by Daniel Dubois to take on somebody as dangerous and capable as Sanchez coming off that KO defeat to Alexander Usyk. They're confused as to why he's doing this. Some people, for example, in the chat room on my live stream yesterday, were suggesting that this is some type of punishment by Frank Warren for Dubois having that party before the Usyk rematch, which Frank Warren wasn't happy about. But personally, I don't really understand what all the confusion is about, because this is exactly what Daniel Dubois did after his first loss to Alexander Usyk. He could have come back against the journeyman in a gimme fight, but instead he took on Jarrell Miller. And say what you like about Jarrell Miller, he's a very tough guy. He throws a lot of shots. He's very physically strong. He forces you to work hard. And if you're coming off a defeat in which you quit, as Daniel Dubois did in that first Alexander Usyk fight, then Jarrell Miller is not really the guy who you'd ideally want as a confidence builder coming back from quitting in a fight. Do you know what I mean? But that's exactly what Daniel Dubois did. Obviously, the philosophy in Team Dubois is rather than rebuilding with confidence builders, is to jump straight back into the deep end and go again. It worked for him last time. Will it work again here against Frank Sanchez? Well, first of all, I want to commend Daniel Dubois for doing this. He didn't have to do it. I wouldn't have thought any less of him if he had taken, let's say, a fight against the journeyman. So full marks for doing what he's doing right here. Is it wise? Well, Frank Sanchez hasn't exactly been on red-hot form, has he, over the past couple years? He's also had his challenges. He lost that fight to Ajit Kabayel, in which he looked clearly injured. And since then, he's only had one fight against the journeyman. So very inactive, Frank Sanchez. Dubois, on the other hand, has been much more active, and he's obviously been fighting the better opposition. So despite the loss to Usyk, the second loss, the form, in my view, still favors Daniel Dubois. I think this is a very winnable fight for Dubois. If Frank Sanchez somehow can reproduce the form that we saw him show us against Efe Ajagba, then I lean towards a Frank Sanchez victory. But we haven't seen that version of Frank Sanchez for a very long time now. Even in the fight prior to, one or two fights prior to, the Ajit Kabayel loss, he didn't look good against Junior Farr. Yeah, he got the stoppage eventually, but what preceded that stoppage wasn't particularly impressive. So this is a good fight. I think both guys have got a decent chance of winning, but I actually slightly favor Dubois because of the recent form. Again, if this was the Sanchez who beat Ajagba and he'd been active, I'd probably favor him. As things stand, I'm leaning more towards Daniel Dubois. Again, kudos to him for taking the fight. One of the issues with Frank Sanchez is that he's very low volume. Daniel Dubois is high volume. Yes, Frank Sanchez is a good counterpuncher, but he can be overwhelmed at times. We certainly saw that against Kabayel when he didn't have his legs. Dubois keeps that jab in your face. He forces you to work. Frank Sanchez is slick, but he's no Usyk. And how are those knees of Sanchez? Have they even recovered at all? That's, I think, what will assist Dubois in this fight is the low output of Frank Sanchez. He's a very low volume fighter. He's explosive. He throws fast counters. But overall, he doesn't throw a lot of shots. You look at the guys who have beaten Daniel Dubois so far, they've been high volume guys. Alexander Usyk and Joe Joyce. That doesn't mean a low-volume guy can't beat him, but I think a low-volume guy gives him opportunities. But we'll see if I change my mind closer to the fight, if I see some impressive training footage from Frank Sanchez or whatever. But right now, provisionally, I would lean towards Dubois. Now, you have to wonder what the play is here, because the winner of this fight becomes mandatory for Usyk. He's currently IBF champion. Usyk would not want to fight Daniel Dubois again. Why would he? He's already beaten him twice. Presumably, if Dubois were to beat Frank Sanchez and become mandatory for Usyk, if Usyk still holds the belt by that point, Usyk would just vacate. And maybe Dubois would fight somebody else for the vacant belt. And for anyone complaining about Dubois getting this opportunity, you really can't complain, because the IBF went down a whole list of contenders who they offered this fight to and turned it down. Dubois was the first guy to accept, because obviously he held the IBF belt before, just lost it against Usyk. Now he's getting an opportunity to become mandatory for it again. It wasn't a case of legacy privilege in this instance. It was a case of, like I say, contenders above him turning it down. Anyway, what do you guys think about this matchup? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and share this video. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out.